So thank you all for joining us tonight. We appreciate it, and we're recording for YouTube. So those people who are watching on YouTube, thank you for joining us. And those of you who can't be with us tonight, we're hoping that you do use the YouTube channel to be able to catch up on the things that you might have missed. And so we're continuing our conversation on the stages of meditation and the jewel ornament of liberation. So tonight we'll do short refuge prayers for our motivation. So if you have your prayer book, we're on page 5. We'll do the short refuge prayer and the 4 immeasurables. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki chodam Shangshu bardu dagni kapsuchi Dagi jinsoki pe sonamgi Drola penshir sangye jupashog. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadamyam pesam chantam she dewa dang dewe kerdang dempar jorchi. Dug now dang dunal gigu dang drel war jorchi. Dug now me pe de wa dang mi drel war jorchi. Nay ring chak dang ni dang drel we dang nam la ne pa jorchi. Okay, thank you. So before we get started with anything new to discuss, does anybody have any comments or questions about anything that we've been talking about thus far? Okay. So we'll continue our conversation on the method of stages, the stages of meditation. So the method is to attain enlightenment. And the stages of meditation are how we attain enlightenment or how we recognize enlightenment, how we wake up from our sleep, our, so to speak, sleep, that we are unaware of our true nature. And our true nature is what we say Buddha nature. So the bodhicitta, the 4 characteristics are the 4 characteristics of that bodhicitta, of that being awakened, of that holy enlightened mind, the heart mind. So these things help us to identify intellectually. The process is to be able to study, take in these teachings, think about what they mean, contemplate the meaning in a proper way by sitting on a cushion or sitting in a proper chair and a meditation room, something in your home where you can be undisturbed for a bit of time, and to go through the process of thinking about these things, analytically thinking about these things. What do they mean, and so on. We've been trying to keep it as simple as we can, to learn the basics and so on, but to get to know these basics as you would the back of your hand. It's very important. You know, we're learning a new vocabulary, and this is the vocabulary of meditation, of how to recognize our true nature. So we've been talking about the bodhicitta. The bodhicitta has 4 characteristics. So does anybody, if you can speak, Alea, while you're driving, can you speak, or is that not possible?
Yes, I can speak. The question was the
4 immeasurable qualities of bodhicitta.
Oh, sorry, I don't have my book in front of me to refer to, and I'm trying to think.
Okay, well then don't worry. You're driving, so don't worry.
Empathy and joy, equanimity.
Yeah.
And
what was the first one?
Is it joy? Oh, compassion.
That was the second one.
Okay. Let's see.
So
loving kindness.
That's right. That's the first one. So loving kindness, compassion, then equanimity. Then joy, and then equanimity.
Okay.
So those are the 4 qualities of the enlightened beings, and we have that potential within ourselves. You know, so we've been talking about, in your prayer book, in the practice book that you have, it's laid out, how we think about these. So I'm not going to go over them, thoroughly like we did last time, but it's something that you should be practicing. You should be making yourselves familiar with. You should be carving out some time in your busy days and your evenings and your morning on the weekend, to make some time to have this, you're becoming the embodiment of this bodhicitta. So to be able to recognize those qualities is very important. You've already been practicing in many ways. We all have. We just didn't call it, bodhicitta. We didn't recognize it as bodhicitta. So a lot of it will sound familiar to you, but, the technique that we use and so on has helped to stabilize that. And as we progress in our practices and so on, there are times when we need to reflect on this foundation. These foundational teachings and so on are very important. So these foundational teachings are part of the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. So we talked about that. Precious human life, impermanence, karma, cause and result, and the faults or the suffering of samsara. So we've been over those, so they're in the book, so I'm not going to spend time talking about them unless somebody has a question about it. And so those 4 foundational practices are what helps us to keep our focus on what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to accomplish being able to rest the mind, rest all the activity that we engage in, the everyday stuff, so that we can experience this true nature, so we recognize this true nature within ourselves. When we quiet the mind, when we quiet the body, that naturally our spirituality is what rises up. And we begin to see that. We begin to recognize that. And so these are the techniques that we use to be able to to identify that true nature that we have. It's a natural part of who we are. But we are working counter to that by doing all these egocentric things and thinking all these confused thoughts and the eight worldly concerns and so on like that. So these are all included in the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma and the method, the stages of meditation within this red book. So now we're going to come to identifying, understanding bodhicitta. We've mentioned it many times. We have a couple of prayers that we use, that include bodhicitta's name in there. And so bodhicitta is a Sanskrit word. Actually, it's two words. Bodhi means enlightenment, and citta means the heart or the mind. The heart-mind, I think, is the way to think of it at this stage. The holy, enlightened mind. It's holy because it is the spiritual body. It is the body that we recognize that we are part of and is part of us. That we are all interconnected with each other through this spirituality. And it manifests in many different ways, and not the least of which is understanding the loving kindness, the compassion, joy, and equanimity, and so on. So it's through that we begin to understand how this bodhicitta manifests, because the bodhicitta is what all these holy enlightened beings mean. It is their essence. It is our essence, but it's blocked up right now. And we need to remove the blockages to be able to recognize the bodhicitta. It's already there, the holy enlightened mind. So this is the fifth method to attain enlightenment, is recognizing bodhicitta and then beginning to practice bodhicitta when we're on the cushion, but more importantly, when we get up off the cushion, we go out into the world and we begin to go to work, we are meeting our family, we are meeting new people, we're coming online and talks like this and so on, and practicing the bodhicitta, the loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, and all of these engagements that we have, these conversations and so on that we have. So, this holy enlightened mind. So there's a number of prayers that we use to help us to remember. Prayers are not prayers to someone or something that is external to us. In our tradition, prayers are remembrances, something that we use to remember our true nature. So we're praying to ourselves. We're not praying to some being out there or group of beings or anything like that. We're praying to ourselves because all this is within ourselves. We are spiritual beings, whether we recognize it or not. So we're learning to recognize it. We're learning the blockages, and we're learning how to overcome the blockages, how to cut through the blockages, and then to establish our relationship with this true nature, with this bodhicitta. So these prayers are remembrances. We're reminding ourselves of the meaning of things. So this first prayer is on page 19 in the red book, if you have that. So it says, "Now I lack the ability to bring happiness to these migrators. Therefore I engage my mind diligently to attain the supreme ultimate state and bring these mother beings to complete happiness. Bodhicitta, the unity of emptiness and compassion. I make effort to practice the ultimate Dharma beyond conceptual thoughts." So this is relatively short, but it's very concise, and has several key elements that are very important for us to be able to recognize and to cultivate, to develop what is being said here. So this first line says, now I lack the ability to bring happiness to these migrators. So this reflects back to what we talked about last week when we were talking about our mother, we were talking about all these beings, we were talking about loving kindness and compassion and joy and equanimity. So we're not able to, just plug people in or plug ourselves in to these people that we want to wake up to their bodhicitta. There's little that we can do except to be able to explain to them, here is a method to be able to understand, here is the vocabulary meaning of these things, the academic meaning of these things, but it's up to them to be able to engage in their cultivation of this, of their understanding this, exactly what it is that you and I are talking about in these sessions, to inspire them to do this. So it says, now I lack the ability to bring happiness to these migrators. I can't just do it. All I can do is point in a direction with this system and able to help everyone to be able to take up these practices and recognize it themselves, develop themselves. So I don't have the ability to just give it to them. I can only teach them how I attained it, how Buddha attained it, how other people have attained it, and so on, as we know it. So therefore, it says, I engage my mind diligently to attain the supreme ultimate state and bring these mother beings to complete happiness. So it says, I engage my mind diligently to attain this supreme ultimate state and bring these mother beings to complete happiness. So what I'm trying to do is to reach a level of bodhicitta where now within myself and within you, that you begin to radiate, literally, begin to radiate this compassion, this loving kindness, this bodhicitta. And people sense it, people recognize it, people, they may not identify it, but they may see that if they've known you for a while, they say, wow, you've changed. There's something about you that is very warm and very heartfelt and very sincere and so on. And you speak, with a certain degree of authority and a certain degree of experience and so on. And people recognize that and so on. So there's a transformation that is happening as we are developing on this pathway. So as I engage my mind diligently to attain this supreme ultimate state, and my motivation is to bring people happiness and so on so that they can realize it themselves. So the next line says, bodhicitta, the holy enlightened mind, is the unity of emptiness and compassion. I make effort to practice the ultimate Dharma beyond conceptual thoughts. So here's a few new ideas, I think, that we should talk about now. And the first one is that the unity of emptiness and compassion. So I think everybody's familiar with compassion. Compassion is the aspiration to be able to help people. We recognize that people are suffering for a multitude of different reasons and so on, and there's little that we may be able to do for them except to have this compassion, that through our heart, this compassion comes from our heart, comes from this bodhicitta, and that we're not pitying them, we're not even sympathizing with them, we're not making any judgment at all, we're just having compassion for the confusion, for the misunderstanding, for the suffering, the afflictions that people are going through. And it's part of being a human being. It's part of the human condition. You know, humans can understand bodhicitta. You know, animals, they don't understand it. You know, so we're in that animal family, but at the same time, we can intellectualize what our plight is, what the human condition is, what the animal condition is, and so on. So having this compassion is realizing that somebody is asleep when maybe they should be awake, or maybe they're sick. Maybe they're sick because of their psychosomatic illnesses, because they're creating this agitation, this confusion within their lives, and it manifests in these psychosomatic illnesses, you know, our neurotic tendencies and so on like that. And we have compassion for people like that. We also recognize that we have compassion for ourselves. You know, and this is why we are engaging in this kind of a systematic approach to purifying ourselves. That here is a system by which we can recognize, you know, our suffering, our confusion. The suffering we may have just, you know, just said, oh, well, you know, this is part of the human condition. This is just part of what it is to be human and everything. Nothing's perfect. And I'm just going to abide in the imperfection and be satisfied with that whenever, you know, I'm feeling that suffering. I just have compassion for myself, and I'll just pass through it. Tomorrow it'll change, or the next day it'll change, or something. But the more that we get involved with the Dharma and the Buddha's teachings and so on, the more we realize that we're responsible for whatever suffering we're having. And that being compassionate means using the methods that we have to be able to overcome the causes of that suffering. We can free ourselves from that suffering. We do it for ourselves. And we can forgive ourselves very easily and so on. It's very easy to rationalize how you know, in my core, I know better than when I do something wrong. You know, I can forgive myself for that because I really didn't mean it. I didn't mean to say that or do this thing or something, but I have compassion for myself. But when it comes relative to somebody else, whether it's your family or it's friends or it's co-workers or something like that, you know, we're often doing things that might hurt other people. And sometimes we don't even realize it. And sometimes, you know, people develop attitudes toward us, you know, because we said the wrong thing or we're doing wrong things or something like that. We may not recognize that they are viewing us like that. At the same time, we're viewing them in their foibles, in the things that they do, that they say, that hurt us. But we have compassion for them. We say, they don't know what they're doing. They really don't know what they're saying. They don't understand that they're being hurtful. And I have compassion for them. And I utilize the loving kindness of bodhicitta, which is another way of saying wisdom. I'm applying the wisdom of my understanding that they are caught in this conundrum of constantly doing things over and over again that are hurtful to themselves, to other people, to me, to the world in general. You know, how people, you know, take for granted the planet, take for granted, you know, where they live and so on. And they do things that may be wasteful or hurtful in some other way that are causing, you know, problems that we're all sharing in. You know, so we have compassion for that. And maybe we're able to have some wisdom about how to help them to understand. Maybe it's something that we can say, maybe it's something we can do, maybe it's something we can point out to them, maybe it's a conversation we can have. Sometimes we can't. Sometimes it's just too abstract to be able to explain to somebody or to try and personalize it so that they recognize that they're part of this whole situation. And so we have to rely on that compassion that's coming from our heart to their heart. It's like an energy. You know, we're sending this energy of love. We're sending this energy of compassion, this energy of love, of joy, and of equanimity, that of bodhicitta, that we're sending this to them. And as we develop this ability to be able to communicate in this way, not just talking with our voice, not just seeing with our eyes and so on, using our senses, but it's being able to transmit this heartfelt heart thoughts to other beings and so on. So some might call that praying, you know, but, you know, and that's fine if you want to look at it that way. But I look at it more as that we're sending these heart thoughts to them, and it requires a little bit more than just the intellectualization. You're sending it with your heart. You know, it takes a few minutes at least to be able to center your physical body, to quiet it, to be able to center and quiet your intellectual mind, to quiet those down, and then to be able to open up your heart in order that you can send that vibration, you can send that love, you can send that compassion, that bodhicitta to other beings. And maybe you have a particular human being that you're sending it to, someone you know that's sick, someone's going through difficulty, etc., and so on. But as you become more adept at being able to do that, you recognize that you can be part of other people doing this for the benefit of all other people on this planet, as we know these beings to be, and so on. So in our practices, we learn how to generate that awareness of the energy, and we have practices that we're sending that energy out to all other beings. First, we have to purify ourselves. We have to collect our own thoughts by resting our physical body, resting our intellectual mind, and using that energy to open up our heart, and then sending this out to other beings and so on. So there's a couple practices that we use that are simple practices that are right here in this book that we'll get to in the coming weeks to be able to do that technique, to be able to use that technique. So right now we're learning to understand this is how we are going to engage in bodhicitta activity, why we are going to do it, and how we do it. So all of this that I just talked about for the past 5 minutes had to do with compassion. And the sentence that we were working on, it says, bodhicitta, the unity of emptiness and compassion. So what is emptiness? Now, emptiness is a very big subject. And it can't be, fathomed out in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 10 days or 10 weeks or something. It's the kind of thing that you get introduced to, and it becomes something that is the object or the topic of many, many, many conversations and sessions, contemplative sessions and so on. But we have to start someplace. So we start with trying to understand intellectually what this emptiness is. Emptiness is basically recognizing that all of our world, all of our physical things, all of our intellectual things are all composites of other things. They're all relative to something else. And that relative to something else is relative to yet something else besides that. So we see that we live in this composite nature. We live in these heaps of ideas, each of thoughts, each heaps of activities, all this stuff that we do. And all of this stuff, because it's relative, its emptiness is that it is not permanent itself. It's not wholly present. It is a relative expression. It is a relative idea. It is a relative thing that we do. We seem to be permanent, our body, our physical body, and so on, but it's made up of many, 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 many different things and so on. And all of those things are impermanent. All those things at some point will die away. They're prone to injury, they're prone to some kind of disease, and they're prone to death, that they leave. So all these things, so all this phenomenal nature that we look out and we see, everything that we're doing right now, our own bodies, looking at each other on this screen right now and so on, we recognize are just all composites of stuff. And that it's all temporary. It's all empty of its own nature. It will not, it's not like, I can take this bell and say, here's a bell that's metal, and this piece of metal can outlive all of us, but not forever. It's not permanent in the respect, if I leave it outside, if I don't take care of it, it will decompose in the elements outside, from the rain, from the cold, the temperature differences, and so on. It will disintegrate at some point, although it seems very permanent right here that can outlive all of us. So we begin to see that things are empty of their own true nature. They're empty of their own true nature. And so we have bodhicitta in order to be able to recognize that. The bodhicitta takes in that notion that things are impermanent. And so we develop this truth, if you will, this understanding that all this relative nature is empty of its own self-nature. Everything is a composite. So there's a second truth. The second truth is the absolute truth, which says that there is this indescribable energy, for lack of a better word, space, for lack of a better word, that we are part of, that is the absolute nature of bodhicitta. So bodhicitta has a relative nature and has an absolute nature. In the relative nature, we're working, the family dynamics are coming in, our work, all this phenomenal stuff around us, and we're recognizing it as being empty of its own true nature. And then we're seeing ourselves as being empty of our own true nature. But yet, we are part of this continuum. We are part of this energy that we're using as a word that permeates, penetrates all things. And that absolute nature is the source, is the embodiment, is that which we are part of, and for us to be able to understand it requires our being able to liberate ourselves from the phenomenal nature. To be able to experience it is to eliminate our attachments and aversions to the phenomenal nature. So the question becomes, how do we do that? Well, this is what the meditation is all about. This is what the system of meditation is. First, we have to identify all these fundamental parts and so on. But then as we engage in the stages of meditation, we're sitting down, we're resting, We're going through the physical aspect of resting. We're going through the intellectual aspect of resting. We're calming our mind and so on. And then our heart center, our true nature opens up. And when we are no longer paying any attention, we no longer recognize, we are beyond our afflictive emotions, we're beyond our senses, we're not affected by them. That's when we have the experience of the absolute. And in that, we come away and we say, oh, now I'm catching up to it. My intellectual mind is waking up and saying, oh, that's what it is. And as quickly as it came, that's how quickly it goes. You know, that which for a moment I say, oh, I recognize, but then a moment later, it's gone. Because now we're thinking again, we're back into the relative. And although the relative is part of the absolute, is a display of the absolute is so subtle that we can't reconcile both simultaneously until we attain the level of what we call being awakened, of what we call being Buddha, of what we call being enlightened, and so on. So it's a process to be able to do this, of catching glimpse after glimpse after glimpse after glimpse, and doing this for some period of time. It's taken us lifetimes to get to where we are. And during this lifetime, we're going through other elements of lifetime, of changes, you know, every 10 years or so. We're going through a change, and we're not the same person that we were, you know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, because we've had all this subsequent experience, and now we've changed and so on, and we have still more work to do. So we're still doing that, and that implies that there's lifetimes after this, and so on. So we're engaged in this process of recognizing bodhicitta, of recognizing the emptiness and not holding on to emptiness. These figments of our imagination, all this phenomenal nature, are figments of our imagination that we have agreed to call this, that, or the other thing. All these different sciences are a way of categorizing, of classifying all these different phenomena that we engage in all the time. So I know this might sound, you know, very abstract to you, but through understanding this, through getting to the essence of this and recognizing this, is liberating. Because all these things that we were fighting against, or we were trying to capture for our benefit, for our self-aggrandizement, for our ego's sake, we find out all this is just false. All this is just impermanent. You know, so why do we want these things to the degree of being able to suppress our spiritual body? Because all these things are temporary. The spiritual body is indestructible. The spiritual body is what's permanent. That energy, what we call this energy and so on, is permanent. And being able to come to grips with this takes this process of being able to rest ourselves, have the experience of being in that mode, of being in that meditative state, then coming out of it, but then going back into it. And the more that we do that, we find that when our meditation ends, we have the choice to go back into the meditation while we're still sitting on the cushion or wherever it is that we are. If we don't have that ability for a number of reasons. We come back into our normal consciousness and we begin to function, but we are bringing that experience with us. And it introduces to us, there's a whole lot that we don't know as human beings. And maybe we begin to realize that what we've hit is the ceiling of being a human being. We say to ourselves, we recognize within ourselves, wow, I've experienced something that maybe I never even thought about, or maybe I did, or maybe I read about or something. But here is a moment where I was transcendent of my physical body, of my intellectual mind. And I'm bringing out of that experience, that transcendent experience, I'm bringing something with me. And my life has changed as a result. What is that I'm bringing with me? I'm bringing with me bodhicitta, loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And now that becomes part of my every fiber, every part of my body. I become the embodiment of that more and more, glimpse after glimpse of that. I recognize more and more. I find more ways in which to engage in the activities of bodhicitta. Things that used to make me upset no longer upset me because I'm using bodhicitta to be able to look at these things from a different point of view. So back to the text, it says, bodhicitta, the unity of emptiness and compassion. So we realize this emptiness, we realize this transcendence of it, we realize its penetration into all things, all this phenomenal nature, and we have compassion for all that doesn't recognize it, that doesn't practice it. The unity of emptiness and compassion. We see the wisdom of the emptiness, and we have the compassion for the lack of wisdom, for the lack of understanding, and so on. So the bodhicitta is the bridge, if you will, that brings these two things together. In a way, we talk about our heart-mind, we talk about our brain-mind. So again, figuratively, we say that here is the heart-mind. It speaks its own language, and the intellect is learning how to comprehend that and how to make that rational thought so that we can begin to practice it, so that we can improve ourselves, so that we can help other people. So they're both mind. They're both described as mind. So it's kind of when these two things come together is the emptiness and the compassion coming together. The bodhicitta is coming together. Until that time, it's separate. But we find that it comes together, and then this is our true nature, being that way. We were born unaware. But at the same time, we were born in that absolute nature, in that clarity, that understanding. What we were taught to do was to interpret that. Our parents interpreted for us. They taught us how to interpret it. Love, compassion, love, taking care of an infant and so on like that. What your brothers and sisters, what all these things are. We began to be indoctrinated into this phenomenal nature by our parents, by our families, by our going to school, by all these different things, the films that we would see, the books that we would read, all these things are imprinting all these ideas on them and so on. And many of them are misconceptions, confusions, and so on being heaped upon us. But if we can remain that childlike purity, that purity of love, that purity of compassion, You know, if you can remember, or maybe you've had the experience when you're with your children and something happens that upsets you as a parent, and your child is witnessing this, what's the child's reaction? I think in most cases we'll see that the child rushes to come to try and help you in whatever way it can. It doesn't understand what caused it, all that, but it wants to help. Maybe it'll hug you, or maybe it'll start crying along with you, or something like that. So the point I'm trying to make is that this bodhicitta is a natural part of who we are, but it gets blocked up as we go through our different stages of growing up and being a human being. So what we're trying to do is to get back to that childlike kind of behavior, acceptance, or something. Not that we become ignorant, because a child is also ignorant of things that can hurt them and things that make them be important and do good things, but they had this love, this loving kindness, they had this compassion. A child's joy illuminates everybody. And the equanimity. A child sees everybody as the same. When does a child begin to recognize, oh, we go to this church, they go to that church, and what's the difference? For them, everybody's just going to some kind of church, or somebody's going to some kind of school. They're just seeing everybody's the same. They don't recognize that one guy is a white guy and another guy is a black guy. They don't recognize that until they reach some age where they begin to say, oh, wow, he's got black skin, or maybe their tradition is different. He always wears a skull cap. Some people don't wear a skull. Some people wear scarves. Some people don't wear scarves. In the beginning, they don't recognize that. It's cultural that, it comes to them, and then finally they start asking questions about why is this? But before that, they're living in this innocence. They're living in this non-judgmental, non-discriminating mode of being. And they're closer to the truth than we are, who have been bombarded by all these misconceptions and carry that on and so on. So we find ourselves getting more and more childlike in that acceptance and that understanding of the causes of suffering and confusion and so on. So this unity of emptiness and compassion. The unity, of course, is a union of two things. So here we're saying this is a union of wisdom is the emptiness, and the compassion is the method. The method by which we are using the wisdom to be able to come in balance now with our intellectual mind and our spiritual mind. So the last sentence in this prayer, in this paragraph is, I make effort to practice the ultimate Dharma beyond conceptual thoughts. So everything I've been talking about, I've been using conceptual thoughts. There's no other way for me to communicate that at this academic level than through these conceptual thoughts. But I make effort to practice the ultimate Dharma beyond conceptual thoughts. My wish is that we could all be together in the same place at the same time. And we're not 2,000 miles away or 100 miles away, that we're all together to be able to experience this conversation at not just this intellectual level, looking at a screen and looking at all the photons and everything, LEDs lighting up and everything, but to be able to feel that energy. And maybe with time, we can transmit that energy 2,000 miles away because of our familiarity with each other And with this process of practice and so on, that we can do that with our love, with our wisdom, with our compassion. You know, my daughter lives 3,000 miles away, and there are so many times that she calls me, I call her, whatever, and I'm just thinking about you. I was just getting ready to put my hand on the phone to call you, you know, and things like that. You probably have had experiences like that. So this is where that love, that wisdom, that, you know, and how do we explain it? You know, we explain it as phenomena, or we explain it as the manifestation of this bodhicitta. So we're trying to live the truth of the relative bodhicitta by helping other beings, by helping ourselves to practice, to learn what Dharma is. That's the relative. In the absolute, we are becoming it inseparably. When we say, Om Ahung, Om Ahung, Om Ahung, may my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings, what we're saying is, may I attain ultimate bodhicitta. So there's this short mantra now on the page. I know Zara and Alaya doesn't have the page right in front of them, but is Bajra Samaza. Bajra Samaza means the indestructible vow that breaks through. We have a wall. We have a barrier. We have an intellectual developed way of being able to remain in phenomenal nature at the expense of our spirituality. We're putting all our energy into this intellectualization. I want to know this. I got to know this. I got to understand this. I got to understand the structure. I got to understand what Lance is saying and all this kind of stuff. But we need to break through that. At some point, we break through that to become the embodiment of that. Not just the intellectualization of the vicarious meaning of all this, but it is the actual becoming. It is the actual transcendence. It is the actual manifestation of this indestructibility, of this absolute permanent nature. And we take this vow that this is what I'm going to do. Bajra Samaza. This is the vow that I use to cut through to do this. So I'm going to stop here for a little bit and give everybody a chance to speak and comment on what we've been talking about or ask any questions. So, Alea, I'd like to, are you still with us?
Yes,
Are you able to talk a little bit?
I am.
I saw your
Yeah.
message that you were going to be losing us or something.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I think what's resonating with me is definitely the concept of all of these layers that are really covering up like our bodhicitta nature and the compassion that you were talking about towards like other people and being able to send that energy to them too, because maybe their vibrations are just not as like high, or they just need more vibrations at that time to kind of help them. And just like sending it like through your thoughts and just like through energy fields, I guess, is really helpful to think about them, keep them in your prayers, keep them in your thoughts, stuff like that. um I think the compassion piece really resonated with me because I think I can apply that to like seeing patients in the hospital and, you know, kind of looking at them more objectively and with empathy versus, um, I think I have a better understanding and more compassion for their condition and their situation versus the judgment that is, you know, maybe easy to fall into that trap. So I think just being able to stay, you know, objective and have empathy at the same time really has helped me kind of evolve and have that discernment as well as like the wisdom and maturity at the same time too. It's definitely been an evolution, but in a definitely like in a positive way. And I think like we were talking about before, kind of like the spiral that we go in and like the spiral of our life and stuff like that, is really nice to see that too. You know, life is not that back and forth, but rather like the spiraling of like events and like seeing things over and over again. Yeah. So
Does
just my initial thought.
does the word bodhicitta and the concept of emptiness, does do you have a resonance with that at all, or is it still, you know, is it still abstract?
See, I guess like, oh, so like the awakening and the emptiness, are those kind of like inseparable type of concepts? Like they go together?
Well, the concept of the bodhicitta is, you know, in the context we're talking about, it's either it's got a dual nature to it,
Right.
the absolute nature and the relative nature. You know, in the relative nature, it's for the benefit of all beings. You know, there's a purpose there, and we're working in that atmosphere of that purpose and so on. But
Mhm.
in the absolute, we are that nature. You know, we are
Right.
that absolute. There is no there is no separability. It is completely
Yeah.
is one and the same.
Oh, it's like an inseparable union, I
It's an
guess. Like,
inseparable union. Yes.
got it. Okay, okay. So like compassion is just like not enough. Um, but pairing that, I guess, with like the understanding of the ultimate nature, like the emptiness of it too.
Right.
Yeah, oh, okay. Okay. Kind of the letting go of some of those things too. So, okay.
So, like I
Um,
said, we'll come back to this many times. So we'll be
yeah.
talking about this, and there'll be more questions and thoughts about it. But I just want to
Okay.
kind of help make that point.
Yeah. Okay. And then I guess like the emptiness also helps prevent maybe being very compassionate, like from becoming maybe like sentimental or selfish, I guess. Um,
In the relative way, yes.
in a relative way. Oh,
Yes.
okay, okay. I think I have to sit with that a little bit more, but
Right.
okay. Okay. Got it. Yeah, that makes
And
tough.
it begs the question of the practicality of doing the practice. You know, so
Right.
you know, it's very difficult. I won't say it's impossible, but it's very difficult to intellectualize your way into enlightenment.
Yeah. Hmm.
It's if you can create glimpse after glimpse of that intellectualization, I mean, that's the possibility. I mean, that's what we're doing from a practical sense of sitting down and doing meditation. But each of those meditations, to be called meditation, it becomes transcendent of the contemplation of the thinking process. In other words, we exhaust the thinking our way into the meditation. So another analogy is like going to sleep. You know, when we go to sleep, you know, we're giving up our senses. We're giving up, our preliminary practices. We're giving up our identity, our ego, until we start to have dreams. And then those dreams begin to be reflections of the ego and so on like that. But it's in a non-physical manner.
Mm. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that explanation.
Well, you're welcome. So, Kunga, maybe you can add some light to this conversation.
Yeah, I'd like to share a description of emptiness that I encountered from one of the readings that I've done. Thich Nhat Hanh, may be familiar with him. He's pretty well known, but he uses the example of a piece of paper. So we could take like our chant books, and he says, that this book here, exists because of all the materials in it. So when you have the piece of paper, that had to come from nature, that had to come from the trees, it had to come from the wood, and those trees had to grow in the ground, and those trees were dependent on oxygen and basically everything in the earth, the gravity, sunlight, all those things had to exist in order for this page to be made. And not only that, all the factories, the people, the vehicles, everything that, came in to create this book, basically the whole world, so this book is dependent on all those things, it's interdependent with all those things. It couldn't exist without them. And like Pema Dorje was saying, all those things are impermanent. The people live for a long time, but they die. All the equipment wears out over time. Even our sun, which we think is pretty permanent, in our Earth as well, we know that both those things will wear out over time. Science has forecast that after a certain number of, billions of years, those things will disappear as well. And then the other part that this book is dependent on is me myself. It's only for me. I make this a book. If I just left this out in the woods, the animals that came upon it, it would not be a book for them. Maybe some squirrels would come and start ripping out pages, or other animals come out to make a nest out of it, and that's what it would be. It would just be debris to use for whatever need they needed it for. It wouldn't be a book anymore. So the whole idea that this is even existent as a book is just dependent on me as a viewer. So it doesn't have any existence outside of myself and the concepts and things I put on it. If I leave this laying around for my dog, my dog, well, my dog wouldn't, but if somebody had a puppy might chew it up, thinking that it's just something fun to chew on. So I think that's another way to think about emptiness, is that the everything that we encounter in the world is, made up like Pema Dorje was saying, this accumulation of other things, real basic things, material things. And once they become together into this object, it's we as viewers, perceivers, who've decided what this object is. If you went to some place where it was a civilization where maybe like you went to the Amazon rainforest and you found this tribe that was still living there who didn't read, and didn't write, this book would be meaningless to them. It would have no identity as a book at all. So just that idea that we as perceivers bring these meanings onto these things that we have are empty, really, of any intrinsic meaning. We just, other than the meaning we bring. And I think that's why our practice is so interesting. We're really talking about changing how we perceive the world. We're just taking it for granted that we're not taking it for granted that the way we perceive things is the way things have to be. And we're opening ourselves up to seeing things in a different way, because their emptiness allows us to do that. So things don't have a inherent nature. We would bring that nature to us. So part of Bodhicitta is bringing the idea to this world that this world is part of our spiritual practice. This world that's why it exists, is to develop our spiritual practice. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. So another way that we can drill down a little bit and say that emptiness is the lack of an inherent reality. That this magnifier has always been there, And it is, indestructible. It's inherently, this is its inherent nature, but it's made up of glass, which is made up of sand, which is made up of quartz molecules and stuff like that. And there's a plastic holder and all that kind of stuff. So, excuse me. So, the lack of inherent reality, that this doesn't have an inherent reality of a phenomena or a person. So all this emptiness is a way of saying that it's all composite, not inherently permanent, inherently existent. It's all relative. So this is the emptiness. To understand this, there's three ways of being able to experience this. And the three ways ultimately merge to come together. But in the beginning, we may have an aspiration to want to experience this, to know this, to understand this. And there's a point of view that embodies this. And we learn this, as we're moving along and so on, from the books, from scriptures, from our teachers, from vicarious experience. But we're holding the view of this. We're saying, okay, I haven't experienced this myself, but I'm holding this view that this is what's happening. This is the aspiration of bodhicitta, to be this way. And there's many other aspects that we haven't talked about yet, with the proper behavior and so on, and understanding non-virtue and virtue and how we behave and all of that and so on like that. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we haven't discussed about any of this, but it's trying to hold all that together in whatever view of it you've been able to accumulate and bring together in your own mind, in your own intellectual mind. And maybe some of it has helped you to open up some of your heart. So the next part of this lineage, the first was the aspiration lineage. The second is the action lineage. And these are the beings, these are the people, these are the practitioners who are on the path, who are engaging in work to be able to help other beings to recognize this and to help themselves to recognize this, that it's not just a passive thing of intellectual investigation and perfection of understanding all these scripture and teaching and everything, but it's actually gaining experience in action, doing these things and so on, and participating in this, and allowing yourself to be wrong, and correcting yourself when you are wrong and so on. So this action lineage, there's this action lineage, and there's many people who you may know, maybe you've done this on your own, but to be part of this action lineage, and we learn that way. But then there is something called the blessing lineage. And the blessing lineage is when you are in the midst of those who have been able to maintain the aspiration, the holding the view, and have maintained the work of doing their best in respect to other beings, in respect to the phenomenal nature and so on, doing their best in that, and seeing that these beings are the embodiment of this. And their blessing is their being able to say, yes, this is possible, and I'm here to show you that I am the embodiment of this. And, they may not be beating you over the head with this, but through their activities, through their studies, through their conversation, through being with them, by catching their radiance and becoming illuminated by their radiance, is a way in which these blessings come. So it's not something that they're teaching you. It's more something that they are illuminating you. And you begin to take on the living qualities of bodhicitta as their inspiration and actualization and practicality of what it is that they do. So this is the realization lineage, realizing that this is possible, that this can be done in this lifetime. Or it may take more lifetimes, and it's glimpse after glimpse. How many lifetimes have we had to get to where we are? How many changes in this lifetime have we had to go through to maintain where we are now? And what are we going to be able to do for the future and so on like that? And how stable is that going to be? Can we remain stable for the rest of our lives? Can we say, oh, I attained Buddhahood when I was 36 years old, and now I've got another 36 years to live? Am I going to lose some of that enlightened quality because of the temptations, because of the corruptions, because of my fundamental impurity and so on like that? Am I going to lose that? So realizing all of that, putting that all together, you see, is how we keep moving forward. It develops a purpose in our lives and so on. And this, becomes the transformation of who we are. And so whether we wish to practice a religion, whatever religion you choose, this helps you to be a better religious practitioner. Because what you have the potential to recognize is the essence of what that religion is. Whether it's Christ, whether it's Allah, whether it's God, whether it's Hindu, whether it's Jewish, whatever it is, whether it's Buddha, all these different things, you begin to see that there's an essence that holds these all things together. And this is what this is speaking to, So giving ourselves the opportunity to do this is fundamental to the progress of what we deem to be our work, our spiritual work. So anybody else have any thoughts? Any more thoughts? There's a couple more things I'd like to mention. Got a few minutes left. So this relative bodhicitta, it works for the good of sentient beings, body, speech, and mind. When we say body, speech, and mind, body, speech, and mind, for their physical body, for their intellectual body, and for their mind body, for their spiritual body. So it works for the good of all sentient beings, this relative. It's working in this universe or whatever, this world. It has the aspirational component and it has the action component. Ultimate bodhicitta or absolute bodhicitta is beyond all constructs. In the relative, everything is a construct. Everything is some kind of illustration, some kind of convention, some kind of way of being able to articulate this conceptuality of what all this is. But in ultimate bodhicitta, it's non-conceptual, it's non-dual. It is total clarity. So to explain this requires the experience, to have total clarity. And through the meditative process, this is what we are able to accomplish, is that total clarity. How long it lasts, is a function of our purity and so on like that, practice, our stability in it, is being adept at learning how to deal with the ego coming in and all this kind of psychological stuff and everything like that. But in that midst of ultimate bodhicitta, there is total clarity. And then it's accessible only with this ultimate truth. The ultimate truth that I am all of this. This is all of me. I am all of that. And it is indistinguishable between the I and the reality of all this. Excuse me. It's like becoming the light. It's like becoming the sun. There's many analogies and metaphors and so on that we use for that. So it's accessible only with this ultimate truth that we can become that. When we become that, when we become the absolute, then the relative all makes sense. We clearly see the relative. We understand the relative, and we can negotiate through the relative without losing the absolute. And it's undefiled. This absolute ultimate bodhicitta is undefiled. This loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity is indestructible. It's undefiled. We can't contaminate it. It may be blocked up. We can block it up. But the bodhicitta itself cannot be defiled. It is absolutely pure. So the prayer that we use to put ourselves on this path is in our red book is the taking the Bodhisattva vow prayer, page number 4 in our red book. So this is something that we haven't been reciting, as part of our opening prayers for our conversations and so on. But now it's the time. Now we can maybe appreciate and return to recite this over and over again, because now we have a basis of understanding what it means. So this prayer, you can recite it along with me. It says, "Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path." So this is the vow. And if you remember, I said Bajra Samaza, the indestructible vow that breaks through. This is the prayer that we remind ourselves of that process over and over again. So we'll go over this prayer again when we have some more time and talk about it. But you can read this on your own, you can recite this on your own, and you begin to piece together the meanings of each of these phrases and words and so on into what we spoke about tonight. And if you want to go back to the YouTube, you want to refer to your notes, refer to the text, the stages of meditation, if you want to refer to the Jewel Ornament book or to this booklet of the outline, everything that we've talked about comes from those. I didn't invent anything. So what I try and do is just make it relative to our common experience of being Westerners, to our level of intelligence, to our level of education, and so on, and to be able to put it in terms that possibly we can relate to. There's a lot more to all of this. Books and books and books and books have all been written about all these different aspects of bodhicitta and compassion and so on like that. So this is by no means a definitive description, explanation, but it is an introduction that I think is worthwhile, that can help, and something that you can reflect upon from time to come back to, to put it in a context, because that's another thing that we try to do, is put it into the context of our Western lives and who we are and so on. So any last thoughts, comments, Alea?
I was just going to say, I think there are a lot of like quantum physics principles that kind of apply to this too. That's something I do remember learning about when I was in Ayurveda. And that, the relativity of the world, I guess, like, that it is all relative. And I think, like you said, like the glimpses, I did recall what I was going to say about the glimpses that start coming through. And Zara had also talked to me about this as well. As you're just kind of living your daily life, you kind of, I don't know, question or wonder, like, maybe why things are happening or how things are happening. And if you've seen something like this before. And I think it's like you almost can't unsee your enlightenment, like just that knowledge and the wisdom and the understanding, once you kind of start getting those glimpses, and the glimpses kind of become a little more regular. And I think to Kunga's point too, I think for whatever reason, I was printing some stuff off at work today, and I was thinking about the piece of paper that I was holding, and I was like, I should really consider not printing so many things, because it really takes so much just for this piece of paper to be made. And I didn't waste the paper, but it just, for whatever reason, maybe something with the connectedness of this group for this evening, I was like, oh, like the paper did come from somewhere. It's a process for this paper to get here. I don't want to like take it for granted. And I think too, like all of our department has been working like quite hard, and we ended up, I didn't expect this, like, because this is my first time getting it, but we've received bonuses, which I wasn't expecting. And I just told my director, I was like, I just come to work and do my job. Like, a bonus is when I go above and beyond. So I literally said, I don't feel like that's what I'm doing, but it was a nice surprise to be able to receive that. It'll come in handy, but I think it's just part of everyone's grace, what they're given. So I think I need to be a little bit better about embracing some of those gifts and graces too, but all in the vein of just not taking things for granted. And the relativity of maybe the lessons that I need to learn in this process too. So, yeah.
Very good. Thank you very much. I'm glad you made it home safe.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Kunga, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I don't think so. I think you did a good job explaining those terms. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your comments, and Alea, thank you very much for your comments and being here. And is there an inspiration? Does that come through? And to develop your practice? I mean, how does this land on, in terms of that, how does this land on you, Kunga? You've got a practice already, I think, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I usually practice a couple hours in the morning before work. And then again in the evening. But yeah, I don't know. I think your inspiration to practice grows on you over time. Um, I I spend even my day at work, I spend most of my time when I'm not actually engaged in somebody, listening to the Dharma or reciting some sutra I've memorized. And whenever I work out, I'm watching some podcast or something. I think it just kind of grows on you. It becomes something that you feel like there's not really anything else that you want to spend your time with.
Very good. Thank you. That's a great example. Alea, can I put you on the spot and ask you the same question? Does this inspire you in some way to want to develop a practice?
Yeah, definitely. And I think maybe too, like part of the practice is just that moment to moment existence of the experiences that you're going through, I guess, on a regular, just like daily basis. I definitely think like all of these things that are in our path are meant for us. So I think what I'm trying to do is just kind of embrace those things. And I was actually telling somebody, like a coworker, a friend of mine the other day, like, like the taking the good with the bad's like easier said than done, but sometimes you just kind of have to do that too. So that's a lesson for me. It's like just as good as some things are, maybe there's some, not so good. And, you know, actually, it was a friend of mine that I went to Ayurveda school with, and she was also saying, some of like your hardest, like some of your best moments and your best lessons are going to be like the ones that came out of a lot of like not pain and anguish, but a lot of like challenge, basically. So, and when I do look back on that and in my life, I thought, yeah, that is kind of true. So it's just the growing pains of the path and as you live your purpose. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Very good. So now comes the important part of dedicating the merit that we have developed, that we've accumulated in this discussion tonight. So I'm going to recite the dedication prayer by Lord Jigten Sumgon. If you have your book and you'd like to follow along, if you'd like to recite along with me, would be fine. Please turn your microphone off so we don't feed back and so on. But this is a very, very excellent, comprehensive prayer of the dedication of the work that we do for the benefit of other beings. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious kind root and lineage lamas. This is page 36 and 37. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious kind root and lineage lamas. Divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Yogins, and Yoginis, Dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. By the virtues collected in the 3 times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and the innate word of virtue, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Sravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Mars, and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I in any case gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hong. Om, Ah, Hong. Om, Ah, Hong. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Bemidorje. See you later.
All right. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. And thanks for your diligence to be here and everything.
Yes, totally. Thank you again. Have a good night.
All right. Have a good night.
Bye.